Present Day Traces of Segregation, Civil Rights, and Collective Memory is an exhibition that's on this floor. It's on this side. You can actually access it through that door over here. But this exhibition invites us to look closely, not only at the historic events that we recognize, but at the places where segregation operated in daily life and where courage reshaped the course of our state and our nation. These 93 photographs focus on what remains: buildings, landscapes, markers, and in some cases, individuals who experienced segregation firsthand. Together, they remind us that this history is not so distant. It's been an honor for me to help guide this project over the last 2+ years, and I invite everyone to visit the exhibition while you're here. And our hope is simple: that these images prompt reflection, conversation, and continued learning. Thank you for being a part of that tonight.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Shanklin-Fleshman, the president of the Baton Rouge Bar Association. We are so excited about this panel. We have rock stars, and we are excited for this celebration. We want to thank the organizations that helped plan this, which is the Baton Rouge Women's Association, as well as the Louis A. Martinet Society. And of course, this wonderful facility, the Old State Capitol. Thank you for helping us to organize this event. And I am so honored to introduce the president of the Louis A. Martinet Society, Harry.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Louis A. Martinet Society, thank you all for coming. This is Black History Month, so I will give a little bit more than my normal speech and before I introduce Mr. Castle. The Louis A. Martinet Society, I do want to recognize that it was created in 1957 to challenge racial injustice. The society was named in honor of African-American pioneer in the legal profession, Louis Andre Martinet. He was an African-American graduate of Straight University Law School, which is now Dillard University, in 1876. The reason why I bring this up is because this week, the Louis A. Martinet Society lost its last surviving founder, which was Dr. Norman C. Francis, this week. So in honor of Black History Month, we will honor all of our founders and everyone who came before us. All right, the moderator for today is Mr. Preston Castille. He is a retired partner and executive committee member of the Taylor Porter Law Firm. He practiced with Taylor Porter for over 25 years. Mr. Castille was an adjunct professor at LSU Law School for 8 years and Southern University Law Center for 22 years. The Louisiana Supreme Court appointed him judge pro temp in 2009, and he presided over hundreds of trials and hearings. He served as the president of the Baton Rouge Bar Association in 2011. We held leadership roles with the American and Louisiana State Bar Associations and served on the Louisiana Law Institute. Today, Mr. Preston Castille is the District 8 member of the Louisiana Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, BESSE, as well as the president and CEO of Helix Global Foundation and Helix Community Schools, a network of early childhood, elementary, and secondary schools in South Louisiana that has a strong emphasis on science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. We are happy to introduce him as the moderator for today.
Thank you so very much. I feel like a kid in a candy store. One, because I'm in a room full of lawyers, and I sort of retired from the practice of law, but not really. I had an opportunity to speak to Judge Ebony Rose Johnson, and I said, what an honor this is this week as it relates to the Johnson family. I was in court on Monday with Judge Ron Johnson, and then today I get to moderate a panel with Judge Don Johnson. If you haven't had an opportunity to walk through this building, you should. It is just oozing with incredible history. If you haven't made it down to the Reconstruction exhibit, you really have to do that. If you're a lawyer and you're a bit of a nerd of a lawyer, you see this living history on the walls, and you see the laws and how man and woman created laws to bend it toward its will to change society in so many different ways. So the law is this incredibly powerful tool. And then we see the photographs of these sort of remnants of segregation around this building and around this city, and what has become a part of our history. When I look around this room, I'm also humbled when I see Justice John Guidry, and I've known, and John, if you don't mind me calling you John, because we've known each other for such a long time, but he is a giant. And I see, where did Judge Freddie Pitcher go? And Judge Alexander said, you know, I don't know how it is that I ended up on this panel when I see people in the audience like Judge Freddie Pitcher, who is a pioneer, a trailblazer in so many ways. This is an incredible opportunity to share history from the perspective of the past, of where we are now, and then what will happen in the future. So I hope this panel will give you an opportunity to reflect on history, but also think about where we are now, and then what will happen in the future. And the reality is that the past is the past. We get an opportunity to learn from the past, and we're going to hear a little bit about the past. And we are now here today because of what happened in the past. But there is something that we can control, and that is the future. And that's in all of our hands. So I am honored to have with me on this stage these incredible people. We had a planning session, and I wish I could have just pressed record, because there's such rich history that came from these folks. And so what I decided to do is, instead of introducing them, I'm going to give them an opportunity to briefly introduce themselves, and then we're going to dig into their own incredible history and past. I'm going to begin with Dr. Rivers. Dr. Rivers.
Good evening. I'm Freya Rivers. Currently, I am consultant and author. Previously, I've been a superintendent, principal, teacher, entrepreneur, civic leader, civil rights. I'm here today because 28 of us, desegregated the public school system in East Baton Rouge Parish, 1963-64. And then I followed filing suit against LSU to desegregate their undergrad division in summer of 1964. I graduated from LSU, my BS. I have a master's in education from Southern and a educational doctorate from Vanderbilt University.
Thank you. Can't wait to dig in. Judge Yvette Alexander.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Good afternoon. My name is Judge Yvette Alexander. I hail from the great city of Grambling, Louisiana, the home of the GSU Tigers, where I grew up, where everybody is somebody. I'm number 2 daughter out of 5 daughters. So that tells you a little bit about me, because you're not the oldest, so you can't be the boss, and you're not the youngest, so you can't get your way. So you kind of just have to fit in where you can fit in. I went to Grambling for 2 years and then came to LSU's law school on an Earl Warren scholarship, thereby not receiving an undergraduate degree first, but getting my law degree first. In 1979, I was one of 2 African-American students to graduate from the LSU Law Center at that time. After that, I actually worked for the Secretary of State's office. Was one of my first jobs was to renovate this wonderful building that you are in. We spent years and years picking paint to match the original paint and doing things like that. And so this is a wonderful building because of Fox McKithen, who was the Secretary of State at that time. Fortunately, I was the chief legal counsel for him when Clark v. Edwards was going on, and I had his ear. So there was no opposition from the Secretary of State at that time. I was an assistant attorney general under Gus. There was no opposition from Gus at that time. So we had people on both sides of that fight. And that's after that, I ran for city court judge, following in the footsteps of Freddie Pitcher. Would you please stand so everybody can just have one look at you? And now I have been at Baton Rouge City Court for 30 years, and I am the chief judge in Baton Rouge City Court. Oh, I have 2 beautiful daughters and 5 amazing granddaughters.
More importantly. Judge Donald Johnson.
I'm originally from Baton Rouge. I'm an identical twin. Let me get that out of the way. Identical twin, and it's been like that ever since. I'll tell you how bad it was. Mom's philosophy was that when the principal or teacher calls, both of you are going to get it. So it was always that way. Ron would tell me, Don, I'm tired of getting your whippings. So that's sort of how we grew up. But starting back in 1960, Ron and I show up at Park Elementary School on Fuquay, and the principal, Clark, she eventually left as principal and went to Southern to become the first female vice chancellor there. The teacher tells us, class, you're behind. First day, we told we're behind. And Ron and I went home crying and said, Mom, teacher said we're behind. We hadn't had an assignment. And she says, well, yes, you are behind, but you didn't put yourselves behind. So run real fast and catch up. Well, Ron and I started running, and we left Park Elementary in '66. We went over to, and that was a segregated public school. We went over to Capitol Junior High for 2 years, segregated public school. And then at the end of the semester, we were told, next year you can go to any school you want as long as it is opposite race. So Ron and I went and got a form called a voluntary transfer form, filled that thing out and took it to Mom, and Mom says, nope, not signing that. We persisted and got her to sign it, and we went off to Westdale Middle School. That was a 3-year middle grade school, 7th, 8th, and 9th. And we stayed there for 2 years and then went over to Baton Rouge High School. We got over there, and I remember halfway through, I told Ron, I need to go back and get my blackness. You stay here at Baton Rouge High School. So I transferred to Capitol High School and went to reclaim my identity, who I was. And I came back to Baton Rouge High, and he and I left there in '72. We arrived on Southern's campus in the fall, and a lot is going on, I'll tell you. The fall of '72. Well, we didn't make it through December. The campus closed down on us. 2 of our class, well, Ron was on the back of the campus, I was on the front. We were told to get off campus immediately, and campus was closing down. And when I got home, my mom says, Don, where's Ron? I said, I don't know. They told us to get off campus. Lo and behold, he comes home, and 2 of our fellow students were killed on the back of the campus. And from that marking, we went off to continue to work and graduate out of Southern. We both got mechanical engineering degrees. He left to go to Pittsburgh, I believe. I left to go to St. Louis. All of a sudden, we discovered a new world by going north. And somehow that reflected on us because we felt we were limited here in the state of Louisiana in terms of our future. And when we got north of Mason-Dixon, we had a different philosophy that our merits would be the controlling measure of what we could do or could become. So we came back, and I went to LSU Law School. I left in '82, and Ron went to Southern Law School. He left 2 years after that. We're both products of local law schools. I've been on the district court for, I want to say 27 years, maybe more. And I was on the city court for about 6 years before that. I do remember this, and I'll close. It was, we were living in Fairfields. Those of you know a little bit about Baton Rouge. Well, I'd heard of this guy, Pitcher. And we were in church one Sunday, and the Reverend says, that's a young black man that wants to be a city court judge. And I said, well, we need to help him. He said, yeah, we're going to help him, try to help him. So I discovered that Freddie Pitcher's and Ralph Tyson's office was on Plank Road, which was not far from where I lived. So eventually I learned about those guys, and I sort of followed them, and that's why I'm sitting here.
You know, history is a wonderful thing, and I love families. And I was picking on Judge Ebony Rose a little bit earlier. Johnson, she was a student in my class, my first class that I ever taught at Southern University. And at the time, I had no idea that she was the daughter of, then you were just Ron at the time. You weren't Judge Ron Johnson. And through this family, the fact that you've got one generation that passes on an incredible legacy to another, just within one family, is a powerful thing. When I look around this room, and I'll just say this is a friendly crowd. We've got people who are very interested in this history, the history of segregation and education here in the state of Louisiana. I look at Judge Freya Rivers, I look at Mike McKay, people who are legends within the Bar Association, who've always cared about justice and doing the right thing. And so we're in a wonderful, wonderful place. We have a dark past, but it has incredible bright lights because we found partnerships and alliances. But it's important that we continue to talk about that past, from whence we came and how we got here. We have a very complicated history. And I'm going to, before I ask Dr. Rivers a question, I got to have a little fun. So I discovered today, I've got a long lost brother. And I'm now 58 years old. And then my brother walks over to me and he says, Preston, I want to introduce myself. My name is John Castille. John Castille, stand up. I want everybody to see John Castille. So John and I started practicing law about the same time together, and we've known of each other for a long time. And then we learned today that we're from the same neck of the woods. And he says that people say, "Do you know Preston Castille? Are you related to him?" He says, "No, I don't think so." And then people will ask me about John Castille, and I'll go, "No, I don't think so." But I declare today that John, you and I are brothers. Welcome to the family. We've also been joined by Ms. Hicks Collins, and she's going to say a little bit in just a few moments. And while she's getting situated, we're going to ask Dr. Rivers, if you don't mind, digging in a little bit deeper, because I had an opportunity to hear your incredible story around segregation. And so I, particularly at the K-12, you've done it on both levels, K-12 and at the higher education level. I think it's, in terms of sharing the past, the history, would you tell us a little bit more about your involvement with segregating the K-12 system? Or integrating, rather.
No, it desegregated.
Desegregated.
We
That is-
still on integrated.
Oh, there we go.
In 1963, it was one of the most horrific years on record. We were celebrating emancipation again. Martin Luther King was jailed. Medgar Evers was killed. We had the March on Washington, the assassination of John Kennedy, the beating of Fannie Lou Hamer. It just went on and on. At the same time, Baton Rouge became desegregated by hiring city workers. We did not even have Blacks that could work on garbage trucks. So that summer, we were able to desegregate city and also the police department. However, Black policemen could not arrest whites. They had to be accompanied by a white police officer in order to do so. So at the same time, we're filing suit to desegregate the public schools. New Orleans started with kindergarten before us, and we were hoping that we would start with the lower grades also, because generally it's less trauma. They haven't become hardened racists. However, Baton Rouge, trying to discourage others from attending, started with the senior year of high school. 1963, our senior year, we left our high schools with all of our great senior activities on the planning board to desegregate the public schools in Baton Rouge. And another one of the 28 just walked in, Elaine Patan. Would you please stand? She not only desegregated Baton Rouge High School, she was the first Black female attorney in Baton Rouge and worked in the office with Attorney Freddie Pitcher also. Give her a hand. You were? Calcasieu, okay. Thank you. So we started that year. I was one of 4 students at Lee High School, 3 males and myself. Needless to say, it was quite a hard journey that year. One, I could not go to the restroom because I would be alone and there was a fear of being attacked. I did go one day and I got surrounded, afraid of being beaten up. So I stuck my hand in my purse. You know, all Black folks carry knives. So I had this little Japanese souvenir knife, the kind you pull out. And when they surrounded me, I pulled out my little knife and held my knife up, backed out of the restroom, just prayed I'd never have to really go to the restroom while I was there. However, I did cut my hand when I pulled the knife out. That's the only person that got hurt. We were bumped from side to side in the hallways. We were spat upon, just name it. Those things happen. However, the most traumatic part of that year was when Kennedy was killed. And we've checked with many students who deseg that year across the country. And basically they had the same kinds of reactions. I was coming through the lunch line at Lee High when I heard, hey man, have you heard Kennedy's been killed? And so the 3 guys and I looked at each other and said, no, this is just another ploy to get us out of here, calm down. Well, it wasn't a ploy. By the time I walked to my English class, the intercom was on. And we realized that it was true. So when it was announced that the president is dead, our class broke out in cheers. And fortunately, I was in the one class where I had a teacher that was not only literate, but compassionate. And Mrs. Church stood up in front of the class and said she would not tolerate this type of activity and the rhetoric that was going on in the class. The vitriol was awesome. She said no more. At the same time she's giving her speech, 2 huge white men walk in my class and motion for me to come with them. And I'm like, y'all just killed the president. You want me to go where? So Ms. Church talked to them and found out that they were federal marshals and they had come to get us out of the school to protect us. So they had me, they rounded up the other 3 guys by their lockers, but the mob at the school was trying to attack. So they literally wrapped us within their arms. One of the other teachers, Mr. Woods, came out and formed a circle, put us in the middle of them to walk us to our taxis that were waiting. We had to travel to school in taxis every day because that's the only way they felt that we could remain safe. The federal marshals were able to get us to the car, pushed us in, and at the same time they were pushing us and slamming the door to the car. A bucket of urine and feces was thrown. It hit the marshals, not us, thank goodness. But that was the kind of year that we had. I had even considering dropping out after Thanksgiving, after Kennedy, but we all met and said, we've been through too much. Too many people have died to get us where we are, so we can't quit. And we decided we would not quit. We'd go back in there, but we would not remain peaceful. So I started carrying pens in my hands with my books so that when you bumped into me on either side, you got stuck with a pen. That stopped after a while. When they'd spit on me, I had a little water gun, you know, the little bitty ones that fit in your hand, and I'd go, they thought I was spitting on them. That's the worst thing in the world. So we fought back. We had to. And it was just a horrible year. So those was just some of the kinds of things that we went through.
Thank you. That's very powerful. We have with us Ms. Barbara Hicks Collins. Would you mind sharing a little bit the story that you shared with us in our preparation? You have a similar but different story. We'll turn the mic over to you.
What story did I share with you? There are many stories. Bogalusa, Louisiana. It's a mill town. Jim Crow systems throughout. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm not. I hope that's all I had to be afraid of. Bogalusa, Louisiana, a mill town. Also had a box factory. And they also had Jim Crow. Everything you can imagine, everything was segregated. This is starting from the beginning. Civil Rights Act passed, and everything was supposed to open. So the leaders, pretty much my father, Robert Bob Hicks, A.Z. Young, and Gail Jenkins, those were our leaders. And they were the ones who did all the negotiation with the laws. They're the one who talked to the lawyers. We had the best lawyers from New Orleans, Collins, Douglas, and Eli. So an agreement was made with the mayor of Bogalusa that Blacks could go downtown and they can shop and they can eat, everything everybody else did. It was okay. So we went down and I have to tell you, it was really nice. You know, I couldn't believe how nice it was. So when we came back to the labor union hall, I said, I kind of like this. Let's go back and let's bring more people. And we did. And they stopped us at the front door. And they said, no, you only have one day. So now we have to start with Robert Hicks, A.Z. Young, Gail Jenkins, and all the people that we could pull in together to start a civil rights movement. We need lawyers. Collins, Douglas, and Eli was in New Orleans. We got them to come in, and so many others. Then we started getting volunteers. They were hearing what was happening in Bogalusa. And so we had what we call core workers. They were coming in, volunteers, San Francisco, people just came in. Of course, they had to stay at our house because we couldn't put them in a motel, hotel, because you know what was going to happen. So they stayed at our house, the Hicks house. Next day, we started back protesting. Still wouldn't let us in, so we started walking the picket line, back and forth, back and forth. That was stressful, that was dangerous, because the police officers there, of course, it's not going to protect us. And the agitators there did everything that they wanted to do, and nothing ever happened to them. I remember one of my girlfriends was walking on the opposite side, and they pull a dress up and laugh. So thank you, we learned something. Now we have to just go in jeans. You have to learn as you go. So now we got the civil rights workers coming in. Of course, nobody wanted civil rights workers to stay with them. So my dad said they could stay at our house. It's 5 children and 2 civil rights workers, Bill Yates and Steve Miller. Joel Overseen came later. He stayed a long time. So what normally happens is that my father and the civil rights workers, they're on the floor, they're making plans, strategizing. And so we start a Bogalusa civil rights movement. You have to get permission from the police officer to get permission to go and boycott, permission to go and walk the picket line. We had to get that. And we did, but it didn't help. You still had, you had Klans and you had white people all over, and they were there to discourage us. But I don't know, something in us just that wasn't gonna work. And so we continued. And then it happened. Bill Yates, Steve Miller riding, and somebody drove, somebody white came after them, and they tried to get out of the car to run in the black area where they know they were safe, and they got caught, got a broken arm. Just a lot of things happened.
Ms. Collins, let me jump in just a little bit.
Believe it or not, when I was involved, I was not crying. I don't know why I'm crying now. to go back with it,
Yeah.
but I was not.
Yeah. You know, we talk about this from the standpoint of how difficult it had to have been to be a child, a young person, to try and desegregate the school systems and the larger community. The rule of law obviously had a bearing on all that happened. And Judge Alexander, Judge Johnson, you've lived through it. You've had an opportunity to figure out ways to take the legal system in a way and manipulate it, if you will, to serve people in a meaningful way. Judge Johnson, you've lived through that a little bit. I'm going to start with you and go back to Judge Alexander.
Sure. One of the things I think is important is that there's a somewhat of a difference when I took the bench, and I think that three colleagues that came before me, Judge Pitcher, Judge Tyson, and Judge Calloway, we came over to Baton Rouge City Court, and there was a certain expectation of all of us, and I recall getting in that position and said, you know, we're here, we're qualified, but I don't think that it was really accepted that we were somehow qualified. And that was always troubling for me because I didn't understand why there was some perception that we were not qualified. We had gone to these law schools, we had taken exams, we had taken the bar, and we had passed, but still there was something there that made me feel, I don't know about my other colleagues, but made me feel less qualified. So I left with that impression every step of the way. So throughout my career, the major thing I would like to everyone know is that affects you. It affects your judgment to this extent. So even after I had acquired that education, I had graduated from LSU, had passed everything on the bar exam the first time, I still felt inadequate. And so I continued to pursue education to try to offset that, to try to make sure I was competent so that my peers would accept the fact that I was equal to them. But I kept going to school, and that was the way I kept compensating, going back, getting 3 master's degrees, going back, getting 2 PhDs, just so that I could feel qualified. So the lesson that I guess I come from that experience is I wanted to make sure that I was qualified. And I wanted to make sure my peers accepted that and respected that. But that was one of the lessons I came out of that. I don't know about the other, but judging while black, let's talk about that. Is that different? Is that any different from judging while white or judging by Asian? And it is because of this. I make certain that everywhere I go and everyone that comes in the court, there will never be an ounce of bias because of the way you look. That will never happen in any court where we come to serve. You all will be treated under the Constitution of the laws equal. And we make certain we very attentive to that commitment. That's my experience.
Judge Alexander?
Well, I come from a background that's a little bit different. The town of Grambling is 99% African American. So I grew up in a place where the mayor was Black, the judge that did the traffic court was Black, the president of the university was Black, everybody was Black. And then I walk into LSU law school, and there's only one other person who looks like me. Well, there were 5 other people the first day that I walked in there that looks like me. I didn't have any of those thoughts about could I be as good as they are, or any thoughts about my competency. I walked in there with a sense of, are you as good as I am? And are you competent enough to do what I do? So when I got to Baton Rouge City Court, it was a very different idea. Of course, the 3 judges that Judge Johnson, that Don named, were gone. Don was there. He pulled me to the side and he said, it wasn't about ruling on cases. It wasn't about the civil code or the criminal code. It was about the politics of the court when we went into our judges' meeting. And he gave me the best advice that I could have ever gotten was, don't follow me all the time because I'm a rebel, which he is, but he's a rebel with a cause. Let's try to work this out together so we can get what we need. I believe that Baton Rouge City Court, because of the lawsuit, we had 5 judges when I got on there. Okay, thank you. 5 judges when I got on Baton Rouge City Court. Don and I and 3 other judges who didn't look like us. And once the demographics changed in Baton Rouge and the lawsuit was filed and it was time to rearrange the sub-districts, instead of having 1 sub-district with 3 judges and 2 sub-districts with, and 2 different sub-districts, 1 with 3 judges and 1 with 2 judges, there became the time when we split Baton Rouge and had 2 from 1 sub-district, 2 from another sub-district, and 1 from the whole. What I've seen change over the 30 years that I've been on Baton Rouge City Court is not only the politics of the court, but also the feeling that I think the constituents or the people who come into court, when you are welcomed into court and when you have a judge that will be able to sit and talk to you, or even when you see a judge that looks like you get a sense of pride and you get a sense of, oh, I'm going to get justice today. Not that there's a different justice in any court, because we all know the Code of Criminal Procedure, we all know the Civil Code, we all know the rules, we all know everything. But where you come from brings a different outlook on different things of how you're going to rule. So I would say to you that Baton Rouge City Court indeed has changed because of the number of people that come through there and the number of lives that we can change by them coming through there. I want to just add this part. When we did the lawsuits for the courts in Baton Rouge, we not only had to have plaintiffs and people working the lawsuit, we had to have somebody at every table. My parents taught me that you can't make any decisions. You can't do anything unless you have a seat at the table. So there was no animosity between the people who represented the state, which would be somebody like me, or people who represented the lawyers who were trying to make a difference and change the look of the courts. Had we not had people everywhere we needed them to be, there could never have been a consent decree, because the people that were in charge didn't have the understanding that they needed to be able to know that this court needed to look like the population of the city and the state. But what I want to say last or leave you with is justice. Pick up a book like Don says, Black Robes, White Justice. There are plenty of books out there that talk about that. What I think that Black judges do to a court as just as any other, Latino, Asian, white, is that they bring their past experiences to the table, and it makes justice the place that we want it to be and where it can be. So I thank God for my journey. I thank God for the people that have touched my life so that I can be the judge that I am today. Had not Don pulled me to the side and said, Yvette, let's do it this way, I could have been a rebel and said, oh, you can't tell me what to do. Who do you think you are? But that's not the way you approach it. You go forth with it, you learn from each other. And as he said, he never quits learning. My JD is my last degree that I got. But you have friends who go on and do different things like that, and learning each other and learning how to maneuver through a system, not overcome it, but maneuver through it. So I think what Black judges have brought to the table is people soon realize, or they realize that you need, when I was growing up, I couldn't get a job at, what's the name of the law firm you used to work? Taylor Porter. Or I couldn't have gotten a job at, I was going to say McGlinchey Stafford, but or any of those places. But once we got Black judges on the bench, you start seeing African Americans in those positions too. Once you get Black judges on the bench, you start seeing African Americans running the Secretary of State's office, running the Attorney General's office, doing things like that. So it just evens the playing field. That's what it does.
What a perfect segue. Hold on to that. So I've got to share a personal story. So Judge Krafasi, Jay Collins, Judge Johnson, who just walked in the room. When we started back in the early 90s, laws and court cases have consequences, Landon. The Clark v. Edwards case had just recently been decided, and sitting on the bench at the time was Judge Janice Clark. And at that particular time, Judge Pitcher, she was the only judge that sat, if I recall correctly, on the civil bench. And Fred, when I joined Taylor Porter in 1994, I thought it was curious in terms of my being hired. Taylor Porter had never had a Black partner in his firm, 100-plus-year-old law firm, and of course, I thought I was hot stuff. I got hired at this very, very prestigious law firm that I still love today. But I have no illusions about history and, in part, why I was hired. One of the first cases I was assigned to was a huge, huge multi-million-dollar case that happened to be positioned before Judge Janice Clark. My first day, I walk into court, and I walk in, I'm the only Black lawyer, and there are about 35 lawyers in this case. And that's not an exaggeration. And I looked around, and I said, curious crowd. And Judge Janice Clark looked over and saw me walk into the courtroom. I didn't know who she was, and she didn't know who I was. And she said, "Sir," looked around at me, "would you come to the bench, please?" And I walked up, and she just said, "How you doing?" And all the lawyers watched me walk up to Judge Clark, and I said, "I'm fine." And she said, "What's your name?" I said, "Preston Castille." And she said, "Great." She said, "Welcome." But nobody could hear what we were talking about. But all the heads were turning, Judge Alexander. And then all of a sudden, that was the first hearing I'd ever attended. And this is what the courtroom looked like. The next week, our opponents showed up with not a Black lawyer, but a Black paralegal. Judge Clark very, very quietly sent a message that, well, wait a minute. And she didn't say anything to me other than, "Hey, how you doing?" But all of a sudden, that representation now mattered. And so one of our opponents hired a Black paralegal. Before long, this case went on for years. Black lawyers started showing up in the courtroom. Don't know how that happened. Now, that's significant because had there not been a lawsuit to enforce the law, to support and enforce the civil rights laws that were already in place, that opportunity would never happen. Our current Baton Rouge Bar Association president, whose last name happens to be Fleshman, her father-in-law was my law partner. This is 32 years ago that I began practicing law. And you think about how history sort of weaves and ties us all together. I was offered a job by Mike McKay's law firm when I joined Taylor Porter, and we remained friends forever. This history is rather incredible, but it's people who stand up and make little statements or fight really hard and suffer the consequences of Dr. Rivers that's really important. Judge Johnson, I hope you don't mind me sharing a story you just shared with me. Judge Ron Johnson shared that when he was on the East Baton Rouge Parish School Board, he said at some point that, wow, we've got this law firm and these lawyers representing us, but we don't have a single Black lawyer that represents the East Baton Rouge Parish school system. It just so happened that Dennis Blunt, another past president of the Bar Association, and I were in court before Judge Johnson. And Judge Johnson shared with me when he made that statement, interestingly enough, Dennis Blunt, past president of the Baton Rouge Bar Association, showed up as a young lawyer at Hammonds and Seals law firm. These decisions that are made and that representation does matter, because I will tell you that Abigail Castille, anybody know who's Abigail Castille? That'd be my daughter. Abigail Castille has enjoyed a wonderful life because of the sacrifices of so many people that just said, hey, Preston, how you doing? That representation really matters, that the laws really matter. That's on a lighter note, but today this is an interesting time. We are the beneficiaries of a lot of history, but history is not done because the stories of the future have not been written. The present is one of celebration, but one of challenging times. And so the question for us, given the rule of law, given all that's happened, is what recommendations do we have from this panel to the larger community? And that is, how do we continue to improve the quality of life, to offer justice, so that all men and women are not just created equal, but they are treated equally? What recommendations do you have, Dr. Rivers, for Abigail Castille, who's a 16-year-old sophomore, living her best life, who doesn't have the benefit of all of this history, but she's going to live for a very long, long time, prayerfully, on this planet, in this country, and in this state? What do you say to young Abigail Castille of how does she continue to ensure that all of the accomplishments, and some might question whether they are accomplishments or not, that we continue to be able to move forward? Speak to young Abigail Castille for a moment, Dr. Rivers.
The number one, the number one thing that I tell any young person is to get out the vote. Go to your communities, help get people out to register, and make sure that they not only are registered, that they get out and vote. We don't have any way of fighting this system except by the vote. We have economic power, but trying to find unity in that is, we have people power. If we would stick together, if we would look at the qualifications of the candidates that are running and believe what they say, not after the fact, oh, I didn't think. No, no, no. They told you in the beginning what they were, what they planned to do, and we had deaf ears, and we didn't go out and vote. So we live in the United States of America. And the only way to make a difference is to get out and vote. As far as laws changing, my father instilled in me voting, the significance of voting in this country as the most important thing. In 1960, he ran for mayor of Baton Rouge, one of the first to run after Reconstruction. He was shot at, our house was shot in, Ku Klux Klan burned crosses all the time. It just became a haphazard thing to see flames coming up in the middle of the night. Dead animals were hung on our porch, rotten eggs and fruit thrown in the yard. But what did he say? Go out and vote. He took the case to the Supreme Court to get race off the ballot, because when he ran, it was Negro Doopie Anderson. Took it to the Supreme Court and won. Education is important. But with or without that education, you still need to vote. So my message to young people is to understand the Constitution, what your rights are, and go and tell the rest of the people in this country what it's all about. Because every day we're losing more and more of our rights, and the Constitution is becoming null and void. Without us standing up as a people together and using the power that we have to vote, we aren't going to be able to make change.
We're running out of time. Yeah, round of applause, absolutely. We want to get to some questions in just a moment, but we had an interesting exchange, and I want to give Judge Johnson an opportunity likewise to speak to young Abigail Castille and give her some advice for the future.
I would tell her this. We are not as courageous as you are. We are not as courageous as you are at 16. We have somehow walked through life and we've compromised and we've surrendered, or we've lost somehow the moral compass like you have at 16. And I want to tell you that that is the greatest moment when you have the most ability to change America. At 16, Ron and I are at Baton Rouge High School, and there's never been a Black on the homecoming court. And we're going around campus saying, this year, that will be the first. And how do we do it? We hold a meeting, and plurality voting. We had to learn what that meant. Didn't know what the word plurality meant. But we had heard about it in '68 when Joe Delpit was elected councilman. So the court was elected on plurality basis. When I assembled the young ladies that wanted to be on the court and said, come by the house, we got a plan. We will have a Black first time on Baton Rouge High School homecoming court because we're going to vote in line. And this is the way the line is going to be. But we had that courage as young people. Now, we probably don't have that same degree of getting out of a line as we do then. So I would tell that 16-year-old, the greatest time is at 16, go create the world. Go get out of the lanes and make America what you want it to be.
Ladies and gentlemen, give this wonderful panel a round of applause. I know they want to say so much more, but I want to give you an opportunity. And so I think someone's walking around with the microphone and want to take some questions from the audience. Questions? The Judge Pitcher has a question.
Thank you. Since my name was brought up several times, I thought I would say something. I want to commend each one of you on your presentation, and I can relate to everything that you've said because to a certain extent, I've lived the same life you've lived. Voting, you know, and Freya, and you know, I'm very close to Freya. I graduated from McKinley in 1962, and it was 1963 when the DSEG started in Baton Rouge. And I can relate to some of the things that they used to talk about, the things that they were experiencing. And I appreciate the work that Don and his pastor, because Don remember, you know, coming to his church and how the community rallied around me in order to get me to where I got to. But one of the other things I want to mention is relationships.
And keep the mic real close to you, Judge.
Having good relationships open up opportunities for people to move up into certain areas, and to your daughter. The kind of relationships that she developed will in turn play a big role on where she could go, how far she could go. The relationship that I developed with a young group of white lawyers, Mike McKay, who's sitting there, who reminded me that 50 years ago, was it 50 years ago, Mike? They invited me to a group called TAPS, the Tuesday Afternoon Philanthropic Society, and where we got together and drank a lot of wine. But at the very same time, we talked about the law. Everybody was sharing cases that they were working on and so forth. But that group ended up very essential in helping me to get elected. Because as I write about in my book, Breaking Barriers, A View from the Bench, published by the LSU Press, 5-star on Amazon.
Shameless plug.
how those guys came together, and with the clergy, Black clergy community in Baton Rouge and the Black political establishment, helped to that relationship group, helped to vote me to the city court. So think about the relationships that she will get involved with, because those relationships can also get her into those law firms, get her into other places.
Yeah, I totally agree. I made a comment about Taylor Porter earlier, but when I first joined Taylor Porter, I was so glad that there was a Louis Martinet Society. And for those of you who don't know, that was and still is, the Black Bar Association. And I just needed to, frankly, I tell people, see people like me. I needed to see Black people, I would say, just so that I could feel comfortable. And that the first couple of years. But as time went on, I will tell you that the relationships that I built at that firm, I didn't walk through the firm thinking every day that I was a Black lawyer. I just became a lawyer. And those people in that firm became my friends. I spent more time with the lawyers that I work with and the professionals every day than I spend with my own family, because that's what we do in our jobs. Those relationships are incredibly important. So whenever I see Fred Krafasi, I giggle, because we spent so much time with the Baton Rouge Bar Association, having fun, cracking jokes, he cracking more than I would. But those relationships, Edmund, were incredibly important. And you build those because someone says, sometimes you have to. Had Clark v. Edwards not been decided and opened that door, I would not have had that benefit of the relationship. And those folks would not have had the pleasure of enjoying my company for 30 years.
All right, and we have
Another
another question.
One thing, Preston, Clark v. Edwards was not decided. It was a consent decree that ended the case based on the governor, the Secretary of State, and the Attorney General, which were all three non-African Americans at that time. The one thing that I would like to say also is that judges have a duty to bring those that come behind them along. I heard you talk about Judge Clark. I tried my first criminal case in the 19 JDC in front of Judge Pitcher. I know we keep bringing his name up, but it was a second offense prostitution or some small case like that. And I put on all I was the public defender. The prosecutor had put on all their evidence, and they had gone on. And I looked at him and he looked at me and he said, "Can you approach the bench?" And I went up there and he said to me, "They didn't say anything about this was the second offense. Move for a directed verdict." So I walked back over there and I said, "I move for
I think there's a statute
directed
of
verdict."
limitations out there somewhere.
And the case was dismissed. So that's what I mean when I say you have a duty to teach those that come after you what you know, so that we can build up on that. So once again, thank you, Freddie Pitcher.
Hello, my name is Jonita Moore. I am a 1L at Southern University. I want to say thank you to all of you for just having us here as students and making this sort of information available. I'm from California. This is the exact type of legacy that I came to Southern for. I relocated to the South. I've never even been to the South from California, very different. But I'm grateful to be here. But my question is, obviously you spoke about how you didn't really think about your legacy. You were trying to be a good lawyer. And right now, as a 1L, I'm being bombarded with, obviously, the law and unlearning what I know from my lobbying days. But I'm also watching the law change in the real time. And I think a lot of the conversations that we're having, especially as common law students, is How do we prepare ourselves not only to learn the law, but how do we prepare ourselves to be good and zealous advocates going forward when we see the world changing before us?
So I want to say something and we'll turn it over to whoever wants to respond. So when I joined Taylor Porter, the other side of the story is that for a very long time, I only got assigned the cases before Judge Clark, and then the other Black judges that were on the bench. And I kept trying to figure that out. You know, I've been here 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, and the cases that I seem to get assigned to and end up before are only the Black judges. And at first, it offended me. It really did offend me. And then I paused for a moment and I said, okay, this is an opportunity for me to learn. Wherever and whenever I'm given an opportunity to learn, I want to do so. And at some point, I actually got very good at being a lawyer. But it was because of those opportunities that if I had closed my mind to what was before me, I would not have had that. Once you get very good at what you do, then people can't challenge you in ways that if you're not. If you want, as I'm saying this as a student, when I graduated from law school, I got a job offer from a law professor, and he had a small boutique firm. And he said to me, I said to him that I think I'm gonna be a great lawyer. I'm gonna be able to bring in a lot of business and do wonderful things for the firm. And he said, you might be able to bring business later on, but your first responsibility is to learn to be a very good lawyer. If you're not a very good lawyer, you'll get clients, but then you'll lose them very quickly. So the first thing is to learn your craft and be excellent at it. And I can't stress that to young lawyers enough. All the glam and everything else is wonderful, but you've got to be good at your craft.
I would tell the student that master the code of evidence. Professor Pugh and I forget who else was at LSU back then, but we were required to know the code, know the articles, so that we could, I remember being told there's a direct and an indirect way to get evidence in. You need to know the indirect. Everybody's going to know the direct. My students will know the exceptions. And with that kind of understanding, you're very powerful because you could get the evidence in indirectly that you cannot get indirectly. So the code of evidence, the exceptions, the mark of a different character of a lawyer. The other thing I want to say is this. I went to LSU, my twin went to Southern. So one day I asked him, I said, what is the mission of Southern's Law Center, a school back then, and what's the mission of LSU Law School? And I read on the emblem, it said, LSU produces the best law students in the state. My twin said, Southern produces social justice lawyers to go out and do justice. Whatever you assign to yourself, be the best at it and keep a mark of doing something socially for justice. That's what I would encourage you to do.
And we have another question.
So based upon your experiences in the civil rights movement and you all's experiences being judges on the bench, we know that we live in some very perilous times. And it seems as if we are going backwards with some of the laws that are being passed. What advice do you give young people like myself who still in this fight? Because I do believe that we're still in a fight. Our people have never gotten out of the fight. We've just been changing the narrative. What is your advice to people like myself? How can we make a change so we don't find ourselves moving backwards?
That's very difficult. But we are losing ground every day. Just last week, the Fifth Circuit Court ruled that it's okay to put up 10 commandments in a classroom. That's a violation of the Constitution. And I don't hear anyone protesting that in the state. However, you will hear from me when it starts being posted in Baton Rouge and they put up 10 commandments in Baton Rouge schools, I'm going to put up my Mott 42 declarations of innocence. If commandments can be put up mine, and they predate your 10. So you can't give somebody the right to do something without giving the rest of the people a voice. But some type of protest needs to be heard. Freedom of speech. Don Lemon, a reporter, was arrested. People are breaking in reporters' homes. That's illegal. More and more, if the SAFE Act passes, please be aware, lawyers, judges, if the SAFE Act passes, women lose their rights. You cannot vote unless you prove that you are a US citizen. This is unconstitutional. And that's what I meant earlier about the Constitution is becoming null and void. And I don't hear enough people speaking up. So the only thing you can do is protest. When they said that teaching and nursing are non-professional careers. See, had I still been in a classroom, all the teachers and nurses, you should have walked the hell out. We don't see that anymore. Are you afraid? We put our lives on the line. And I don't see that happening. We're too complacent. So unless you get out there and do something, you have to fight for it. You have to continue to file suits against these issues that are controlling us. And that's the only thing I know. You get out, you protest, you file suit, and vote. Those are the three things that can make a difference. It's not easy.
Thank you, thank you. Mary, do we have time for one
Yeah.
more question? Great.
Yeah, I have a question. Barbara, when you were in Bogalusa, I know there are a lot of things that took place in terms of trying to get people out to actually participate in marching and demonstrating and trying to get the word out that we need to be about the business of trying to get our freedom. What would you say would be a good, I guess you would say, a way of getting people involved now, especially young people involved in getting involved in voting and into the struggle?
Boots on the ground.
Boots on the ground.
Stop dancing it and doing it. Get people out. Boots on the ground. Go door to door. All you can do.
History is the key. Once you get those young people together and you tell them how it was, what you went through, what you're still going through to get you to the place where you are now. My mom would say the whole time is that we put our lives on the line to get you into that white school, which was supposed to give you better education. You don't have time to act a fool over there. You got work to be done. And we sit down and we talk. We have conversations. That's what we have to do. I mean, we don't have the Bob Hicks and the A.Z. Young and Gail Jenkins to pull them together, but that's what we have to do in order to get them moving the way we move.
And I just want to say that Ms. Hicks is somebody who has really put as much effort into it as she speaks of. She marched from Bogalusa to Baton Rouge and was part of that historic effort. Her family has long been active and involved in the Bogalusa community. My question to you, Barbara, is did you ever think about leaving Bogalusa?
Absolutely not. We were at the point that we shall overcome, it's done. And so you stay there and you give that history. That's pretty much what the Robert Bob Hicks Foundation is doing now. We are very close to completing a Civil Rights Museum that was, of course, our family's house, and bringing those young people through so we can give them the history. I envision what we saw many years ago, where you had the grandparents or the great-grandparent sitting down with the children in front and telling stories after stories after stories. They will remember that. So we still have a lot to do, but we don't give up, ever. We don't stop.
I'd like to reflect on that.
Sure.
I remember the elders and the parents focusing us on a moral compass and telling us to do right. So that was permeated throughout our lessons as young boys and girls. And I remember Hubert Humphrey came to Baton Rouge. I'm thinking he's either running as vice president or president. My twin and I are downtown. My mom told us, get dressed. I worked for Victor Busey. And if those of you who remember who he was, president of AFL-CIO, my mom was his maid. And he said, Hubert Humphrey's coming to town. We need some blacks in the audience because Mr. Humphrey, as vice president, I'm not sure, has come and said, I'm going to LSU and I want to see some people in the audience. So we took our cue from mom who was leading the way. I think that our children are looking to us to suggest to them the moral compass. And they're waiting on us and we're sitting still. It's as if we are complacent. So they're going to follow us. And if we don't set the direction for their country, their democracy, then we will not have it. So I think that to tell the young people what to do, we as their elders and leaders, we need to step up our game. Some of us are too comfortable and our children are watching and they're asking us, do we have the courage of our forefathers, our foreparents? And maybe we don't, but if we're lacking it, let's get it back. And I think they will follow if they see us lead. So that's what I would like to add to the conversation.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again, please give this panel a round of applause.
And thank you all again so much for attending this evening's program. We are going to have our reception right outside in the rotunda, and I'll be walking around with some program evaluations if you have a few moments to fill those out for us. And y'all have a wonderful evening, and please follow us on social
You want to
media.
plug your book? Wait a minute, we got one more shameless plug to be made. Dr. Rivers.
Yeah, I just want to plug my book after Freddie plugged his. This is about the desegregation of the schools in Baton Rouge. It's called Swallow Tears, which is what I had to do many a day. So I think my husband has some copies with him if you're interested. Thank you.